gather my thoughts on this because it's an important question. I think science there definitely has had an impact on me in terms of how I think about things. The one thing I really do appreciate, probably more than most people who are not in science, is logic. When somebody does things or they make decisions that are, at least that I perceive as not being logical, and I really I think have an extra layer of appreciation for when you do things that fall into a logical sort of process. And I think being involved in numbers and mathematics and also in the sciences, it has ultimately allowed me to appreciate that even more. And it's probably why the people who I tend to interact with have a high degree of logic. So I think I could probably expand upon this a little bit more, which I think is probably worthwhile to do. I think the other thing that I learned when I started in graduate school in particular was that, God, I think it was the biggest thing I learned, and you could say I learned a lot about mass spectrometry, I learned a lot about physics, there were many things I learned, but perhaps the biggest thing that I learned about was that I had the ability to solve problems. And in actuality, that turned out to be so valuable, because as scientists, this is what we do all the time. We're constantly, on a daily basis, being exposed to problems that you need to come up with a solution on. I've had conversations with many other people, and in fact, I mentioned Mary earlier, my partner. I mean, we've discussed this, and I think we both had the same experience in graduate school, where it's not like you're reading a textbook and and then you have a test that you're regurgitating things that you've learned. This is you're actually looking at things that people have not understood previously in your research, and you're trying to decipher what's taking place there. So and I think it was like 2 or 3 years into graduate school, I started realizing that essentially I was learning to think for myself, and that was good. And I think the other part, again, since I mentioned logic earlier, when you think of scientists, you think of them as being hyper logical, and they're the closest that you can get to robots, and but the best scientists are the ones who, again, this is just Gary talking, but at least to me, the best scientists, like generally the most successful scientists, are the ones who are also very creative. And so coming up with these solutions is not a trivial task, and you can't use pure logic to come up with solutions to problems. Your mind has to go into different places. And I mean, personally, for me, later in the day, I usually, when I have things on a daily basis, often I'm trying to figure things out, but usually I'm totally useless in the latter parts of the day. But when I wake up in the morning, it's oftentimes the solution will be right there in front of me. It's and I've come to anticipate this now. It's almost a natural part of me my problem solving, is that I just wait for the answer to come, instead of just trying to bang my head against the wall until it comes. It usually happens quite naturally. It really is quite enjoyable.
Wow.